All right, you guys, this is our first pod class of the semester, and my special guest is Dr. Amanda Mayeaux. She is the director of the School of Kinesiology, and we're going to touch on a wide variety of topics today, dealing with professional development, and our stories are going to naturally kind of evolve with our experience and expertise and some of the insights that we give you. So, Dr. Mayeaux, welcome to our first ever professional development pod class.
I love the idea of pod class. This is great fun. So,
What to start off our conversation, obviously I want our graduate students to take home a lot of insight and add to them. But I think the theme of today that I would like to kind of keep coming back to is this concept of it's not who you know and it's not what you know. In education, we're going to all roughly learn similar things. I know there's kind of a continuum, but we're going to all have these tools to use. So it's not what you know and it's not who you know, it's who knows you. And I think that's the beauty and the elegance of professional development is getting people to know who you are. I'll give you a
mhm,
couple of my personal insights before I turn it over to you for context. I know who Michael Jordan is, but
right.
Michael Jordan doesn't know me.
That's a
And so
great,
it's not going to get me anything, right? And so how do you develop? I think that's the essence of professional development. How do you get people to know who you are? Everybody emphasizes first impressions, but to me, it's more about the fourth impression, the fifth impression, the sixth
right.
impression to really make an imprint so that people, when they see that name on the resume, they know who you are. So to start off, can you just kind of expand on that concept of it's not what you know,
Yeah.
it's not who you know, it's who
Knows
knows
you.
you.
Yeah, I'm going to go back to my seventh grade middle school math teaching roots and be Miss Frizzle for a little while, if y'all remember the magic school bus. But Miss Frizzle would say, take chances, make mistakes, and get messy, right? And a lot of times I think we're afraid to make a mistake. Like we're afraid to do something new, like a pod class, right? Because what if it isn't perfect? What if it doesn't work out great? So, my career has just been a hodgepodge of a lot of things, and I know a lot of people. And a lot of times that's just because I put myself out there and, sure, I'll join this or I'll take a calligraphy class, because I'm bored or something crazy. And I think about Steve Jobs. There's a great video online about he gave a graduation speech. And in that graduation speech, he talks about popping into a calligraphy class. And he just audited it, just sat in the back and took the class. Wasn't really registered. Don't do that here. But anyway, uh, and what he learned in that class is what the fonts were based on when he started developing word processing. So there's a lot of times in our life when we have an opportunity to do something and we might sit back and think, I don't know how this is really connected to anything I want to do, but you never know. So, get in there, take the chance, make the mistake, get messy. But what happens is you meet people and you make connections with people. And years down the road, literally, it can be 20 years down the road, they're like, hey, Brian Campbell, we were in a blah, blah, blah class back in 1996. Or you remember we did that workshop on how to make a crawfish pie, whatever.
Yeah,
I'm forming this group. Would you like to be? So, it's see every opportunity as that, an opportunity, not necessarily to totally change your path in life, but just to make a connection with somebody, to learn something new, to figure out what you like and what you don't like, because in your 20s, you really don't know.
it's true. It's true.
Life is long.
And and I think that's a great way to start it off. I hear our generation, the future is really bright. That things might be different, but they're
Right.
really smart. They're really resourceful in their own unique way. And if there's an opportunity, one of my little cliches I'll say is where there's high tide, there's low tide. And so
Mhm.
if there's more tendency to communicate via phone or text or not person to person communication, to me, that just leaves an opportunity for our students who are willing, to your point, take
Yeah.
that risk, to take that chance, to make that ask, to shake that hand, to introduce themselves, that's less competition for those connections. And as you know, it's those connections that are so valuable.
It's
There's
huge.
no
It's
connections
huge.
class here. There's no
Right.
connections class anywhere. And
Right.
that's why we're trying to give them like the secret sauce.
Right. Well, and I think the internet or technology, not the internet
Hmm.
necessarily, offers such a great opportunity. I belong to a little devotional group in the morning,
Hmm.
and we have been together since 2019, I think. And every morning we don't meet. We just there's an app that we all are part of, and we put our little thoughts in there and our little prayers and stuff. And so it went on about 2.5 years, and we decided to get together. And I had never met these women face to face except for one of them in my life. And so we've only met once face to face. And so, I mean, this is going on year 6 now, but every morning we message each other and we have a little, something. And um, it's interesting that these women, I won't say who they are because
Hmm.
that's our confidential, but they're very, several of them hold very high places in such in certain areas in the state and in other states, and I had no clue, none. And so what was interesting was that it was just an interesting connection. And then one of them, she had a child come here to UL. She called me up. She's like, "Hey, would you mind meeting with us?" And I was like, "Sure." So it's just interesting how you don't even know people, but you're just open to join
Absolutely.
something and just be consistent. And, you know, um, whenever I have a major issue in my life, I will reach out to these people that I've legitimately spent 2.5 hours with in my life face to face and say, "Hey, could you just, think of me this morning? Could you say a little prayer for me this morning? This is going on," or whatever. And I've had some opportunities in my life that I've had a struggle, like how to handle this situation. And there's been two of these ladies in the group who have said, "Well, give me a call." But vice versa,
Yeah.
they've asked me to give them a call
Yeah.
about certain things too. So it's just, you never know where it's going to come from.
Absolutely. And there's
Never
different
know.
types of family. Like you have your immediate family, then you have your academic family, then you have your social network family. For our students, they're going to have their athletic family or
Yeah.
their fraternity family, sorority family. And so to that point, I think it's important that students know, like they're like, okay, I get it. We need a network and meet people. Where would one do it? And the real cliche answer is every day. I mean, you're
Every day.
networking in class, you're networking with your coaches, you're networking with your community, you're networking at church, you're networking at fundraisers,
Yeah.
nonprofits. And then also here's a unique one for our students. If you're football, if you want to get into football in some regard, whether it's a coaching, administrative, every year in Mobile, Alabama, which is not far, they have the NFL. It's kind of like a combine. It's the
Combine.
Senior
Yeah.
Bowl.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
That's a big conference. They don't say it's a conference, but the NFL Draft Combine is a big conference where people
Right.
come and network and shake hands and introduce themselves.
Yeah.
And the NCAA tournament, if you want to get into basketball, that's a
Right.
big conference. So we'll talk about our experiences, but can you I like to think of it, there's quality within quantity. In other words, the more
Mhm.
times you do things, the greater the chance something's going to
Right.
go in your favor, right? So let's talk, if you don't mind, about how can students put the odds in their favor,
Mm.
networking with the right people for their unique interest area, conferences, conventions,
Yeah.
seminars. What's some of your background on how
So,
to network with the right people?
yeah, I was, these students probably don't know, but I was a teacher for a long time. And I was a second year teacher, and I had a good friend. Her name was Gwen, and she was kind of my mentor. And she comes in and says, "Hey, we're going to this math conference. Why don't you come with us? And we're going to present, and I want you to present, blah, blah, blah." And I was like, "What?" I mean, I'm like 23 years old, right? Maybe 22, 23. And I'm like, I can't do that. She's like, "Sure, you can. Yeah, yeah, you can." And so we go to this conference, and there's like four of us, and two of them were like kind of bigwigs at the school board, and we present, and when we finish, people stood up and were clapping for us, and I was like, "What just happened here?" Right? And what happened was Gwen expanded my vision. Okay. And I was addicted to this conference thing, not just the presenting, because I also went to stuff and every, a lot of things, I'm not everything, but a lot of things that allowed me to become the teacher I was. I won a couple of awards here and there, was because I participated in these conferences and I met people and I learned new things. My students were struggling with the math and I was struggling, and I went to this conference and I learned about the Japanese method of teaching thinking, and so I went whole hog in it, like just everything. And then I wanted my students to be better writers, and so I heard about National Writing Project, so I signed up as the only math teacher in National Writing Project, right, at LSU that year. Everything was about a conference. Now, here's what deters people from going to conferences: the money. So here's strategies. I mean, I've been a poor teacher and I was married to a poor cop. Okay, so like we literally ate beans and rice. But my husband and I prioritize this professional development. And so, maybe I didn't get a coffee or maybe we didn't have pizza, whatever. I always saved for conferences. And we would try to sometimes tie our family vacation to it, or we would tie our couple, like my husband and I go off 2 or 3 times a year by ourselves. We would tie that together. We went to Charleston one year, and I will be honest, it's a struggle. Then the other thing I would do is I would ask for my principal to pay for it, and sometimes they would say no, right? But if I was presenting, usually the answer was, we'll give you $500. Okay, well, that was $500. I don't have to stay in a 5-star hotel. Sometimes I buddy up with friends and we share a room or whatever, right? Um, but then when I got to the college level, uh, there's not a lot of money for that. And as an assistant professor, if you want to be an associate, you've got to go to conferences. And so I did some side hustles, and I would do this or do that. And that was my conference fund. So if it's $1,000 to go to Mobile, you got to look at that $1,000 as an investment in you at 30 years old, or an
Hmm.
investment. It's just like putting money in the bank or
And
in
it's
the stock
compound
market.
interest.
It's compound interest. And so sometimes it's really hard when you look at how much it costs. I mean, there's professional conferences that you and I go to that the registration might be $800. Like, I get
But
it.
for students, I don't want students to drop the class.
No, no, no.
There are student registration
Yes.
fees that are a fraction of.
Right. And that's why it's important to go as a student,
Mm,
because you can get into these organizations as a student. Um, like with my grad students in leadership, one of them, our big conference is ARA, and she ran for a position at ARA as a grad student and won.
wow.
Then there's like you could write a paper, maybe there's a paper competition, you can win a paper competition. But the other thing is to partner up with those conferences and present. Put in a
Mm,
poster competition, or a poster presentation. Those are usually the easiest. Put in a round table, put in a paper, work with your professor, because then not only are you there, you're also presenting information. And
yes.
then go to listen. A lot of times, we get to go to New York City, whatever, and we want to go play. I think you
Hmm.
should play for 100%. I think you should play. Okay. Because I love to travel. But when you get there, you also need to go to the conferences. And don't just go to the big name conferences. If there's somebody, Brian Campbell's presenting on, something specific, knee injuries, and you get there and there's 3 people in the room, so what? You go in there, listen to Brian Campbell, and at the end, hi, my name's Amanda Shuford. I'm Mayeaux. I am from, UL Lafayette. I would love to get your contact information, and I would love to read your paper, whatever. Because you never know, 3 years down the road, you might be looking for a job,
Amen.
and Brian Campbell is on the search committee at UL Lafayette, and he remembers you, right?
It's a
So
leap of faith.
it's a leap of faith. It is 100% a leap of faith.
And I love and to segue, because all these topics really blend together. It's a gumbo
100%.
pot. So what I wanted to segue into is how the going to a conference for me, going to Kansas City, first time I ever flew on a plane, to go to an athletic training convention because I heard they look for graduate assistants there. I'm by myself. I don't know anybody. End up having an interview next to me on the plane who were looking for graduate assistants. That was a 2 hour interview right there, right from a conversation. But what I wanted to segue to is resumes, where if people
Mhm.
see that you're a graduate student or a student going to a conference, that speaks that you're
Yes.
willing to take that leap of faith. You're not afraid. You're willing to go and step out of your comfort zone. That speaks on a resume. So if we could segue into how professional development conferences, conventions go into a resume, and then
Mhm.
resume building, resumes in general, I kind of love that segue because that also speaks not at the time of networking in the moment, but in the future, having that on your resume, having that as something that you are willing to do that maybe a large percentage of students aren't. That's a feather in your cap, as they
Yeah.
say.
Yeah. Well, I think there's this piece that when you're hiring people, you're looking for certain things, right? And what I try to tell people as somebody who's done a lot of hiring in my life, most people who show up have the same resume.
Mm,
All got the great GPA. They all have I waited tables, which waiting tables is my favorite thing to see on a job resume because that means you can get along with anybody. But
mm,
anyway, right? But what I'm always looking for what set you apart. And so the things that tell me what sets you apart is that you were a risk taker and you were a creative person. So maybe you did an international mission service trip in the summer to, I don't know, Guatemala, whatever.
hmm.
Oh, that's interesting. Maybe you did study abroad and you did French immersion program in Nova Scotia. Well, that's interesting. Oh, you went to this conference and you presented a poster? Wow, tell me about that. So, what I see in you is that you're willing to take a risk. And a lot of times, I think we sit back and we think we're just not good enough. Well, you know what? Probably when you look on the internet, you're going to see that top 5% of people out
Hmm.
there who are winning the awards at the conferences and all that stuff. But let me tell you something. There is a whole another 90% out there who just showed up, right? So it doesn't have to be perfect. It just has, you have to just try. And so on that resume, I'm always going through and I'm checking off, yeah, you got the requirements, right? But now I'm looking for what did you do to expand yourself? What did you do to take a risk? What did you do? And sometimes one of my favorite things to see on a resume is you applied for a grant that wasn't awarded. And then there's another grant that wasn't awarded, and then there is one that was awarded. That tells me you can take
You,
feedback and rejection.
and
I love that.
you're willing to shoot your shot
Right.
as
Because I can't, I don't want people who always have to be perfect, who are only showing me the very best. No, I need to
mm,
be able to take chances, get messy, make mistakes, because that is how we evolve. I'll tell you a quick story.
yeah,
I had the opportunity to sit in spend a day with Marty Sklar, who was Walt Disney's number one Imagineer.
absolutely.
And so this day was a pretty incredible day in my life. And Marty talked about how when Walt Disney, was still alive and part of the company, they would come into this room and he would just throw out a thought and say, "This is what we're going to think about today." And there would just be papers and markers, and all these Imagineers would be around the table just doing all this coffee, came in and looked the least bit interested. Walt Disney would say, "Do you have a thought? Here's a marker," kind of thing, right?
Yeah.
And he talks about how that innovation and that open space for there to be innovation is what made Disney what Disney is, right? I think a lot of times in workplaces, um, if we're afraid of innovation,
Mm.
but the world is changing very quickly. And so this generation of young people that we're talking to today, you are the innovators and it's on the edge. And so you've got to be able to show that willingness to just try. And you can't be afraid of failing. It's okay if you fail. So what? Life is long. Get back up, do
That's it.
something new. And the other thing is it gives you, well, in psychological terms, this is called state of flow. So flow is when you're doing the thing that you're meant to do, right?
Mm-hmm.
And you're just in the groove. It's like when you're teaching, because sometimes I stand outside of your class and I listen, right? 7:30, 8:30 in the morning. I just sit out there and listen to you. And it's beautiful because it's your thing. It's what you do, right? And so a lot of times we're so afraid of the mistake or we're so afraid of the chance that we don't even just jump out there. So that's what I'm looking for on that resume. So when you're building the resume, make sure you got all the pieces.
Mm-hmm.
What do you have in there that sets you apart, that makes you a little different,
Mm-hmm.
that, you know, shifts it up just a little bit? And that's where kind of the magic is.
Yeah.
The other part of the resume, I'm sorry if I'm
No,
going,
please.
um,
That's what we
the
want.
other part is when you read the job description,
Mm-hmm.
um, how well do you match? Because I've interviewed a lot of candidates. Okay. We have job searches always going on, right? And it's always interesting to me because maybe, Brian Campbell sent his resume and his CV in, and I love his CV, but it's just not the right match for this job.
And for the students, that's a curriculum vitae. It's
Yeah, a
all the
curriculum vitae.
stuff
Oh
you've
yeah,
done.
okay, CV. Yeah. So, but maybe a year from now, I open a new position that was perfect for Brian Campbell. And I call him up and I say, hey, I know we didn't hire you this round, but
Mm-hmm.
this job is perfect for you. So in your resume building, understand sometimes I throw it out to whatever job. I mean, it doesn't have to match perfectly. Sometimes they adapt the job to you. Sometimes.
Mm-hmm.
But remember in that sometimes you don't get the job, but don't break that connection because they
Mm-hmm.
might have something down the road for you.
Mm.
And if you don't get the job, well, two things. One, follow up immediately with a thank you message. And I know this is
Mm-hmm.
old school, old school.
But it works.
If you can send a handwritten note, it's really nice. An email is fine. A handwritten note is nice too. Immediately after the interview, don't even wait 24 hours, get it done. If you don't get the job, ask if you can get some feedback.
Nice.
Now, sometimes they'll say, absolutely not. I'm not talking to you. But sometimes they'll say, yeah, sure. We would love to give you some feedback. Maybe you need a little more experience here. Maybe, you know, you need a little more of this over here. And also practice interviewing. I do
We were going to
a lot of,
segue to interviews next.
okay.
Absolutely.
So what do you want to ask about that?
Well, I wanted to follow up before we segue into interviews. Should resumes be ergonomically designed for each job you're applying to? Not that the stuff changes, but maybe there's some emphasis on
Yeah.
some things. The concept of a cover letter, maybe the students haven't
Yes.
been introduced to. Or I think when I was a student, I just thought a resume was like one size fits all, and you just printed
Mhm.
out a bunch of them. Can you kind of touch upon
Yeah.
how they should be customized for the emphasis of your application?
First, keep a standard running CV or resume. Just every quarter, I try to update that, which I'm behind on this year, but anyway. Um, I try to update those. Second, I do read the job description, and sometimes the job description is specific about what they want. And so I will definitely edit that and send them in exactly what they want or emphasize.
Hmm.
I might go in there actually bold something or
Hmm.
something like that, and I make sure to put that into my cover letter. Now, here's where AI and things like Chat GPT are phenomenal. Okay.
Hmm.
Because you can go in there and say, write a cover letter and you can put this job, you can list the job skills, and then you can take things from your resume and copy it in there and say, write me a letter. Now, you do have to edit it so it doesn't sound like it came out of Chat GPT, but you can get a really nice cover letter that really hits the points of what they're looking for.
Hmm.
Um, So I do customize my resumes per
Smart.
job, and I definitely do my cover letter per job.
Does that
But
also
I
include
have a standard
references?
one. Yes. Now sometimes I just put references upon request.
Ooh, nice.
And sometimes I actually put my references depending on what they say in the job description. The other thing is, I have a reference list of about 10 people who agree to be my references, and I pick and choose those references based on the job. So let's pretend that I was going to apply for assistant superintendent because, that's my K-12 is my world, right? Well, who I would pick for those references is going to be different than if I was applying for an associate professor position at another university. If I was applying for
Absolutely.
that, that's going to be, the dean, one of my friends who's been a professor with me, one of my grad students that I've graduated with. For an assistant superintendent position, I'm going to go back to people I work with in the K-12 world, so
Absolutely. For the
make
students,
yourself a reference list.
it's like applying analytics, right? You know how in
Right.
sports that's a real big thing?
Yeah.
It's putting the odds in your favor, giving you
Right.
better odds of making those
Yeah.
connections.
One
That's
other
very
thing,
clever.
the other thing about reference letters is I don't particularly love blind reference letters where I don't know what somebody said.
True.
So I'm going to say this. If you ask me for a reference letter, I'm going to ask you for your resume or your CV, and I'm going to write that letter, and then I'm going to send it to you, and I'm going to be like, read this and tell me if it's spot on. I've written since October, I've written, I think, 37 recommendation letters. Like I write a lot of recommendation letters.
Hmm.
Okay. So, but sometimes people aren't going to do that. They're just going to write the letter. Now, sometimes you have people who say this. I had a boss one time who was this way. Just write the letter and I'll sign it. Okay, so this is what I did. I have my very best friend. I said to her, I'm very uncomfortable writing this letter for myself. And so she actually helped me write the letter. And then I took it to him and we worked back and forth and then we signed it. It was really awkward.
Yeah.
It was super awkward.
Yeah.
But now a lot of times they have just the the forms. They send out the forms and you fill out the checklist form, and then you might upload a letter or not. One of the things I do say to people when I ask them to be a recommendation is, if you get a form, please don't feel obligated to check the top 10% on every category, because nobody's
Mm,
perfect and it kind of makes it sound like you didn't pay attention. I would rather you give some specific examples.
mm,
So those are a
yeah.
couple of pieces. Pick your recommendations very carefully.
Yeah. That's big.
It's a
And
huge piece.
I wanted to, before we segue into interviews, skills and strategies, I wanted to, if you had any unique, one time I saw, and again, this is the brilliance of this generation. I saw a student have a business card and on the back had a QR code
Yes.
that scanned to their resume, right?
Yes.
So they didn't have to have old school hard paper
Right.
copies. I was like, how
Yeah.
brilliant. What a brilliant
I would
idea.
do both things if you don't know, because, especially if you're going in somewhere and the
Good point.
person's older. My daughter just
Good
had a
point.
big job interview. We're hoping she gets the job, and she walked in and she had everything digital. But then when she pulled it out and it was
Great
really
point.
nicely printed, it was bound. They were like, "Oh, wow, you just took
So
this to another level."
so be prepared.
Be prepared. Just be prepared. And it doesn't cost that much to go to
Uh,
Office Depot and print
True.
it. Like it
So
just doesn't.
so let's say my brother, I have a 8 year old, my brother's 8 years older than me, and he used to say this. He was very confident. He's a chemist. And he said,
Mhm.
if I could just get into the interview. So for students, you apply with a resume or you apply with an application and they may bring you into an interview. My brother used to always tell me, if I could get in my foot in the door and get that interview, I
That's a
I
thing.
feel confident, right? So I think that's a beautiful and elegant segue into, you put in your resume, you put in your application, and you get that very special interview. And I want to emphasize how special that is, like how much
Oh.
of a unique opportunity, if not to seal the deal, for the experience of the interview, right? So now
Mhm.
let's segue into interview skills, strategies, do's, don'ts, experience stories of the interview.
Okay, so you're right. The interview is such an opportunity and you never know where the connection is. So I walk into every interview believing this is an opportunity for me to learn something, right? Um, I'm going to just start with first impressions. Dress appropriately.
Mm,
And I don't care what you think that means. You call your grandma and you ask her what appropriate is, and you take it up a notch from there. Because as a I was a high school principal for a while, and I can tell you, I've had several times where on paper that person looked like the top person, and they walked in my office, and I thought, there is no way you're going into a class with 16-year-old boys looking like that. I'm just saying, okay?
yeah,
So, just to get nitty gritty here, cover it all up,
yeah,
look professional, and match the job. So, I mean, if you're coming in to be I don't know, a coach or an assistant coach, okay, what would you wear on game day? If you're going to wear a suit on game day, you wear a suit to that interview. Whatever it is, you need to show you're the best and you need to step it up and it needs to match and it needs to be ironed because what that says to me is that you cared enough about this interview
hmm.
to take your time to look nice.
The little things make the big
The
things.
little things make a difference.
Yeah.
It just does. You brushed your hair, you know, you brushed your teeth, you whatever, you look nice. And I know it just sounds crazy,
No,
but
it's
if you're
important.
not willing to put in that effort for the very first moment. So that's the first thing, first impressions. When you walk in, shake hands, don't hug, shake hands, right? Um, Sit up straight and look people in the eye. And here's the other thing, it's okay to have a few notes. And if you want to bring it, what I usually do is bring in like a notebook with a pen, and I might have a few little notes on that notepad. And I just say, listen, I made myself a few notes and I have my resume. The second thing is, or third thing, when ask a question, it's okay to think for a second. We're not expecting you to just
Process.
gush.
Absolutely.
Yeah. And, okay, you can actually repeat the question back to them, which gives your mind a moment to think. And it also helps your mind digest. If you don't understand exactly what they're saying, ask them to clarify. And it's just like writing a paper. So whenever we write papers, I use the pie example. Okay. What's the point? Why is it important? And what's my example? So let's say, I get asked, what's one of your strengths? Okay. Well, one of my strengths is I'm very creative. And that's important because when it comes to a problem, I have out of the box ideas. An example would be when I had students who didn't know how to write in math, I joined the National Writing Project, whatever. I just gave you the point. I just told you why it was important. And I just gave you an example from the real life of me. That's your answer. And if you have that in your brain, you don't start going all over the place and
Mm.
chasing the rabbit,
Hmm.
right? You can be very concise. The other thing is most interviews are going to be very similar questions. Strengths, weaknesses, tell us about a time when, something
Hmm.
like that. One of my tips I give to my students when I teach this in various classes is when someone asks you your strengths, go ahead and have three strengths in your mind. Know why it's important. Know what your examples are. Just have those canned in your brain. Okay. Take your weaknesses and make them a strength. Okay. So let me give an example.
Mm.
Okay. So one of my weaknesses is I tend to be a perfectionist. Okay. Now, why is that important to know? Well, that's important to know because I will push so far for it to be perfection that I might get in the weeds
Mm.
and I might start procrastinating because I'm worried about it not being perfect. And
Hmm.
an example of that would be, I don't know, a paper I'm working on right now. Actually, this is true. I'm working on a paper right now, and I told my research team I was going to be done with it by the end of January, and I am not done with it because I just don't think it's good enough. Now, my research team knows this, and so my research team, one of the guys in my research team called me 2 days ago, and he's like, "Okay, I don't care if it's perfect, just send me a rough draft." Now, what that just told the boss is that I'm a really hard worker and I'm going to do a really good job. But I might need a little support
Hmm.
in getting it processed. The other one is another weakness that is always a good one is I am extremely punctual. Okay. So why that's important is I'm always going to be here on time. Actually, I'm going to be early. But the negative to that is it annoys people who are not punctual.
Mm.
And sometimes I struggle having grace for that. Now, that just sounded like I'm being very, but to a boss that says, woo, this person's on time. And I give an example like, one time I got to this restaurant where I was working at, and I was there 20 minutes early, and it was cold, and I was locked out, and I had to wait on, everybody to get there, and I got a little frustrated, but you see what I'm doing here?
Absolutely.
So whatever your weaknesses are, they it's okay to have them, but figure out how to spin them where they can be a positive, but they also tell the boss what you need done differently.
Absolutely. The I love the punctual thing. Have you ever heard the stories of my class starting right at 7:30,
Mhm.
right? We get to work and
Yeah,
they know ahead of time. And if you're running late, watch the videos online. But the point is we can develop habits. And what maybe some students realize or they don't is that being on time, what if you're going for your dream job interview and you plan to be there right on time and then all of a sudden the train happens, all of a sudden
yeah,
all of a sudden, right?
yes,
Worst case scenario, you're early and you can prep, you can decompress, you
yeah,
can meditate. It's always, if you're on time, if you're early, you won't ever be late, right?
right.
So I'm
Well,
fishing in the same pond on that.
when you get there early, that's a great point. I forgot to say, I do this too. When you get there early, I love to just sit in my car and just kind of get a sense. I leave my phone in the car and I take off this watch and I leave it in the car. And when I go in, remember this, the interview starts the minute you drive on the property
Wow.
because they're watching.
Wow.
I promise you, they're watching because I was a boss and I'm watching.
Incredible
Okay.
insight.
Then you walk in the office or wherever it is, and there's the secretary. Number one person to be nice to is the secretary. Hi, how are you doing? You having a nice day? I love that brooch you're wearing, whatever, right? Great weather we're having, keep it neutral. When you sit down, the boss will be with you in a moment. Sit down, sit up straight. Don't play on your phone because it's in the car. Sit there nicely. You might look through your resume, that's fine. If there's somebody in the office, and sometimes we stage this, maybe they talk to you, engage with them. I don't care who you think it might be, you engage with them. I legitimately got a job one time because the janitor was in the office and I started visiting with the janitor. And after the interview, the janitor went and told the principal, that's the person you should hire. She's
J-
phenomenal.
janitors and secretaries.
Got the job with the janitor. Literally, that's how I got the job. So then you walk into the boss's office, whatever, you do the interview, you leave, you thank everybody, you leave, thank the secretary when you walk out. Thank whoever's in the, have a nice day. Thank you so much. Get in your car. Don't do anything. Don't call nothing. Drive a mile away. The whole the whole
It is
thing is an interview.
the whole
The
thing.
whole thing is the interview.
Brilliant insight. And,
Yeah.
we have a couple students who have aspirations to play in professional ball. And it
Oh,
reminds me, one of our greatest players of all time, Brandon Stokely, was when I was an athletic trainer. And some of the NFL scouts came talk to us, the lowly student
100%.
athletic trainers and the lowly
100%.
managers. And they were like, what is he like? What's he like when the coaches are like that? That happens, right? So I
Yeah.
love that, and
They're going
I
to
have
ask your friends and they're going to ask people and they're going to
absolutely.
show up when they want stuff because What people don't want is a pain. I've had a few NFL players in my history as being,
Uh-huh.
a principal and a teacher and stuff. And one talks about Nick Saban showing up at his high school and got there. The interview was at 10:30 and he got there at like 8. And he talked to every student he ran in the
Wow.
hall. And when he got into the interview, he told the student who played for the Chargers at one point, said, if I would have heard anything negative, I wouldn't have been at this 10:30 interview.
Wow. Wow.
So,
No
it
stone
really
left
is
unturned.
right. And when you're talking about people knowing you, what when that coach or that boss shows up, what are they going to hear from the person in the hallway? Were you nice when you
Hmm.
walked into Bourgeois? Were you nice to the girls at the front desk or the guys at the front desk? When you lost your ID, were you gracious about it and said, you know what? I just really made a mistake. And is there any way you can help me? Thank you so much.
Yeah. The true
You know,
character of a
yeah,
person is when they do for others and not expect anything in return. And those are the scenarios.
100%.
What are you like when the
Right.
cameras aren't on, when people aren't
Right.
looking? I have one more question, and
Sure.
obviously with any insight for specifically interviews, how important is it to, you're there for the interview, they're interviewing you, but I've also been told that you also need to be interviewing them, right? There's
100%.
reciprocity there. How important is having good prepared questions? And maybe some of the students would rightfully so. When I was their age, I didn't quite get this
Hmm.
form of life, but you're also interviewing them to show
Right.
interest, like, and it also makes you look good as a valued commodity. How important is having questions for the people who are interviewing you back in return?
Oh, that's a 100%. So, and it can be some like questions like, what are the opportunities here
Mm,
for me to grow? Like one of the ways I pick jobs as a young teacher is, are you willing to pay for my graduate school? And I have 3 graduate degrees and some school district paid for all of them. Okay. I mean, basically that's how I picked jobs is, what is your professional development? Do you pay for conferences? Like that kind of stuff. What opportunities will I have to grow in this company or with this organization? Number one, that's a great question to ask. Second, how would you describe your culture in your company or team? And what do you define as a good team member? Those are 2 great questions. You can always follow up. When will these decisions be made? Usually they'll tell you. I would not ask about salary or benefits in a first round interview.
mm.
Okay. Um, Second round interview.
Does that, just to
Yeah.
expand, does that mean or infer that that's the first thing on your mind? Like you're
Yeah.
going to that
Yeah.
job with that
Yeah.
being, not
Right.
necessarily culture, fit,
Right.
growth. Gotcha.
Well, and I also say this because our students will probably be looking everywhere across the country. My father, God bless his soul, was a wise man, even though at 21 I didn't know he was that smart. He used to tell me by the time you get to be 25, you're going to realize I'm brilliant. But at 21, I didn't know that. And I got a really nice job offer in Fresno, California. And it was like double what I was going to get paid in Louisiana. Right. And I was just like, oh my gosh, look at this. Right. And then he's like, figure out how much it costs to live in Fresno, California. Right. And so that was some changes there. the Don't get lured just by salary. You want to
Mm,
ask about benefits. You want to ask about like I'm saying, like how much professional money do I have? Can I go to conferences? Can I do this? Like, and
it's
it's
the
okay
long
to
game.
interview. Play the long game because odds are you're not going to be in this job forever. But what skills can you get through this company, through this organization? What training, all of these pieces that someday might take you somewhere else. And you don't necessarily
Absolutely.
have to know where that somewhere else is,
Absolutely.
right? And so, kind of there's a great poem by Robert Frost that he says, way leads on to way. And way does lead on to way, right? But what is this opportunity right now in front of you? How is it going to develop you as a professional and as a person for the way you don't know that's coming ahead?
Amen. the
Yeah.
last topic, and then I really kind of love our last thing where you kind of dictate the assignment for the
Okay.
students. But our last topic is general etiquette, and I'm just going to toss out a few different types of things. Etiquette on social media for a young professional,
Oh,
etiquette on personal and business or email, texts, like just professional etiquette that I think sometimes as society's norms kind of shift, sometimes we lose focus on maybe some of
mhm,
these do's and
mhm.
don'ts of professional. Now, remember, I'm not talking about etiquette with you and your friends, but there is a professional
Yeah.
etiquette, just like you said earlier about dressing professionally. But can anything that stands out, social media etiquette, personal or professional etiquette, and then email, text, letters, just any of that kind of etiquette that you could kind of add some context to, for our students?
So, I have a really close friend, our couple friend, is really close to us, and Mike is a profound man, and he teaches this to his children. Don't buy yellow cars because they don't resell, and don't put anything into writing you wouldn't want read aloud in front of the church.
Mm,
Okay. So, it's a lot of times it's really easy for us to text or to message things that we really shouldn't, and we've all been guilty of it. It's so easy to screenshot that and it totally destroys you. And in our youth, we do things that, there's a Supreme Court case, Mahaney versus one of the school boards. Go look it up. It's interesting where a girl Snapchatted something and
mhm.
it was a big deal, right? Be careful what you put out there because when you apply for a job with me, the first thing I do is Google you. I'm going to tell you, I do it. And I'm out there looking at your social media and I'm looking at what people say because I want to know. Because here's the thing when I hire you to work for my company or my organization or my school, I do not want to be on CNN or Fox News because you put nasty things out there. So you've got to decide where you want to be. And you can have fun on social media and be neutral about a lot of things. You can go read my social media. I am pretty neutral. And I've learned that over time, right? But you the boss does not want to have to be
Mm,
interviewed because you were out there doing inappropriate things in Cabo, right? And now you're working at our organization with summer camp with 15, 16-year-old kids
mhm.
and you were out whatever. And you can live and be like, oh, well, this is a free country. You sure do have free speech. But I also have the freedom to make choices based
That's
on
it.
your speech not to hire you. So you just need to be careful. And so I love that idea. Don't write, take a picture, or do anything that you legitimately wouldn't get up there and show
Yeah,
in, you know. And so there might need to be some scrubbing done as you move from college to
absolutely.
your career. Go in there and,
And that's
you
part of
know,
growth. That's
it's just part
natural
of
part of
growth.
growth.
And
Absolutely.
look, if something pops up and you get asked about it, I had someone who worked for me who was a bodybuilder and was in competitions. And I don't know if you know, but in bodybuilding, you wear very kind of skimpy
Mhm.
outfits, right? And some parents, of course, were mad and they started, complaining about this person. I'm like, first of all, it's a bodybuilding competition and you can't really do anything about it. I mean, but I just talked to the person and they decided to make their account private instead of public. Okay, that was cool, right? You never know what people are going to go crazy about.
Yes.
And so if you do get asked about something like that, just be willing to talk about it and to share. Or if you've done something super stupid, just super stupid, and you get asked about it, say, I was 16 years old.
Amen.
I was
Absolutely.
dumb. This is how I made restitution. And now I do blah, blah, blah every year to
Yeah.
make up for that.
That's how my
I will
dad
tell you,
my
owning
dad
it
was a
is huge.
elementary principal, and he
Mhm.
finished last in his class, was a dropout, drugs, alcohol, but he used that once he cleaned his life up to say, "I'm gonna reach every kid
Yeah,
that I see that I can relate." And those kids, when he told their story, they're like, "Wow, this person can really relate to me."
yeah.
So there's always a way. And I love that about taking ownership, and like it goes back to what you said. This is brilliant. It goes back to what you said about taking a negative and spinning it into a positive, right?
Yeah, this is what I
Um,
learned.
can you talk about the last topic, and then obviously anything else that's on your mind that you'd like to share about email etiquette? I get emails all the time from
Ooh,
students that'll have no dear, no, not that it, but I don't even know what they're talking. I don't even know what
right.
class. I don't even know. It's just like, uh, what's the this? And I'm just
Yeah.
like, I don't know. So just it doesn't have to be perfect, but just a few things when communicating via email that maybe our young professional development students need to kind of make sure they have some must do's for an
Mhm.
email conversation.
So, I'm really anal about the way
Hmm.
my students save files. I want their last name and the assignment in the file name. I'm the same way about email. In the subject line, just put,
Mm,
KNES 308 hyphen test 4,
something.
something. Dear Dr. Campbell, I hope this email finds you well, period. I am emailing you to discuss test 4 in KNES, whatever I just said, right? I was in a car accident, blah, blah, blah. Attached is my accident record, yada, 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 yada. Is there any way we can have a conversation about this issue? Now, let's say you're following up for an interview. You want to put in there, job interview for assistant coach.
Mm,
Dear Dr. Campbell, I hope this email finds you well, period. Not good. Well, um, I am very appreciative of the opportunity to interview today with you, blah, blah, blah. I enjoyed meeting your team. A couple of things that I took away is that you're not y'all, your group is looking for someone who's creative, innovative, and a team player. I think my resume attends to all three of those aspects. Additionally, I learned that the opportunities your company could offer someone like me are invaluable, blah, blah, blah. I look forward to
hmm.
whatever, with your name signed. The other thing is make sure your email isn't rawdog97
Mm,
at gmail.com.
your personal
Good,
email. Yeah.
good Lord. Just go to Gmail,
Yeah.
make yourself a professional email that says brian.campbell at gmail.com. That's it.
Done.
And don't use your school email because if you graduate, they're not ever finding you.
Wow.
We have
It's
people
true.
who applied for interviews, applied for jobs in our college over the last couple of years, and they always put their school email and they've graduated, and we email them back
Wow.
and we can't find them,
What a great
right?
point.
So just now, today, go make yourself a professional email that has your name at whatever.com and use it only for this kind of stuff.
Brilliant.
It's amazing. And put your signature, have your nice signature line. I'm going to be honest. I know people love the quotes below it and all that stuff. Just don't.
It's fluff.
It's just a lot of extra,
Yeah. Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
Just clean, simple. Again, ChatGPT is a great write a thank you note to such and such company for this job. These were the things highlighted. Bam, it'll write you a beautiful email. Have someone read it first.
Hmm.
Send it out. Simple, simple, to the point, clear, grammatically correct. That is huge because it tells me first that you took the time. And the last thing I guess I'd say about this is in this world of informal communication,
Hmm.
um, we forget that there is formality.
Wow.
And you just don't know me well enough to
Wow.
communicate with me like that yet.
That's a great
Now,
point.
after we've worked together for a little while and we're friends or peers, friendly peers, okay, yeah, maybe you can shoot me an email. Hey, Amanda,
Yeah.
uh, can we get the heat turned on in Bourgeois? Sure, no problem. Or
But
a
that's
text.
earned.
That's
That's
earned.
earned.
Don't do
That
that up
what a
front.
great point. And it
Yeah.
seems to a common Brian, a commonality with a lot of topics that we talked about is good communication.
Just good communication.
verbal communication,
Yeah.
written communication, formal communication. I really like that. All right, you guys, every time I have a podcast guest on, they will dictate the assignment for
Mhm.
today. It could be inflective. It could be, what I love about this is we're learning as we go. So Dr. Mayo, could you give the class what their assignment will be after watching
Mhm.
this pod class?
Yeah, so here's your assignment. Open up Word and start a resume. And at some point this semester, go to the Career Center and let them look at your resume. And by the end of the semester, have a nice resume. It's worth it. And then make that your resume that you work off of. And if you'll just keep it updated and keep rolling with it, then you can always pull it, copy and paste the pieces you want for whatever job. The second part of that is have someone or a couple of people who know you well look through it because you probably have forgotten some of the stuff you've done. And nothing is
Wow,
too
good point.
minute to put in that resume at
Good
this
point.
point because you're young, you know,
Do
volunteer
we
opportunities,
tell
all
me
that
if
kind of
I'm
stuff.
using this term right? It's a living document,
It's a
right?
living
It's
document.
going to constantly organically be growing and
Yeah.
developing, um and as someone like me who's a visual learner, sometimes I'll go through old photos on my
Yeah.
phone or on social media and be like,
Yeah.
"Oh yeah, we did this," or
We did
"We did
this.
that," right?
Yeah.
But what a great point to have someone external look through it, because
Yeah.
you may have not, or you may not have given credit to something that you should be
Right.
given credit for. That's an
Yep.
outstanding way to lead off. So Dr. Mayu, thank you for taking the time today,
Sure.
and we really appreciate you. And we'll keep you updated how this class kind of develops and grows. And
Okay.
I know you love the students, so if anybody ever wants to just come by and say hello, and after
Yeah.
seeing this podcast, I'm sure you'd welcome them to come by
Yeah.
and put a face to a
Yeah.
name.
All right. And a last little plug. I think
Yeah.
it's March 12th. I'm going to be talking to one of the organizations, the OT organizations, about how to write a letter
Ooh.
to get into professional schools.
Mhm.
And if anybody wants to attend that or if anybody wants some more information, I can help you with that.
And
So,
I'll get that info as well, and I'll post it, to
all
the
right.
mill. All right,
Thank you
Dr.
so
Maya,
much.
thank you for your
Good
time. You
job
have a
on your
great
pod
day.
class.
Thank you. Stay
All
well
right.
and stay
Bye.
warm.
All right.